Hello all, A Knife's Tale here, bringing you another knife review. And if you have any idea what you're looking at, you can tell that this is probably a pretty big divergence from the knives I've done so far on my reviews. This is pretty much my fourth knife review, and we're jumping in hard here. We're looking at the Sharp by Design Mini Tempest. As you can see, I have two of these knives. And honestly, I'm very tempted to try and get a third one in the Bowie blade shape with the flipper tab, because these are both the drop point front flippers. Why do I have two of these knives? Because I love them. Let's just get it out of the way. I love Sharp by Design's models. Brian Nadeau is a wonderful designer. He is probably one of the best custom knife makers in the US. He has precision out the wazoo, even in his OEM project knives for Reate. He hits a level of consistency and quality and perfection and that even other Reate knives often fail to live up to. I guess he just gives really, really, really good, precise data and files for their machining to work with. Who knows? I have a weakness for his designs, and I love them. I'm hoping to one day get at least one of custom from him. I would like an Arch Nemesis, but that's down the road. Maybe, hopefully, sometime. Let's take a look at these knives. First of all, these are titanium frame locks with carbon fiber inserts. There's definitely some micarta ones, I think, too. In this case, this is the Shipwreck, which was a Caviso exclusive, and this is the Arctic Dark Matter Blue or whatever that was from the original run. They are right hand tip up only, sorry lefties. And the blade steel is, I believe the original one was an M390. It doesn't say it anywhere that I'm aware of. But I also think the Caviso ones were an S90V, which is a nice kind of upgrade. Even though M390 is a great steel, I kind of like S90V more. Let us get looking at specs on these. Very elegant, very nice knives. 3.5 inches of blade, almost on the dot to the front of that scale, and to the back of that plunge grind. The overall length is not quite 7 7/8, so something like 7.8 inches overall. And the handle length is just under 3 1/8, but a little bit over 3 1/4. So we'll call that 3.35. Let's do a size comparison. My first size comparison. I could have done it on my last video, but I decided not to. I knew that one was going to run a little bit longer, so I left it out. But today, we're doing our first size comparison with the Civivi Elementum, a budget small knife. And where did you run off to? There you are. The Civivi Conspirator, the full-size knife. You can pretty much see that this knife is in between them. It is closer to the Conspirator, just a bit. It's got probably just as much blade sharpened length as the Conspirator, but it also is also quite trim. It is not a tall knife. It is in nowhere quite as thick even as the Civivi Elementum, or tall, I should say. Same goes for closed profile. Thickness. It is a bit of a thicker knife, but these are contoured scales. There is a very nice contour to them, and it's very, very comfortable as such. I would imagine the thickness, though, despite that, is still relatively similar to the Conspirator, which it is. So it's very easy to carry. This is not a large object by any means. Get the calipers. See just how thick this handle is. Alright, so we're just a hair over half an inch, which is actually a tiny bit thinner than the Conspirator. The blade stock, a little thicker than maybe it had to be, at 140 thousandths, 139 thousandths, but 140 thousandths. I wouldn't have minded seeing that a little bit thinner. But this is still within the realm of reasonable, universally good blade stocks. The behind the edge is 19 to 20 thousandths, which is totally perfectly reasonable. It has an almost full flat grind, and it is reasonably enough thin. It is strong behind the edge, but it's not thick. It's not ultra thin, but this is a good cutter. It's just a good performer in general. I will say that you have to go a little high to get to the tip because of all this belly out front. But these are pretty great knives in design and function, and they do cut well. And they're reasonably sharp. This one's been used a little bit. Yeah, they're not hair-whittling sharp. Most knives aren't out of the box, but they're cutters. They'll perform. They'll do just fine. Weight on the Mini Tempest. Hello. Zero out, would you? Okay, taking your sweet time there. Weight on the Mini Tempest is 3.21 ounces, which means this thing is under 3.40. The original's heavier. I wonder if M390 is slightly heavier than an S90V. I wonder if that's the difference, because there's not really any other major difference here. Interesting. So this one is under the ounce and inch mark. This one is just a hair over. But hardly difficult to carry at all. Hardly unpleasant weighted. And yeah, there's just not really much bad to say about that. These things carry like a dream, and they perform well, and they look great doing it. These knives are both on bearings, as you can probably guess by the very smooth drop on these things. The hardware check. Where is that? T8. Yes. T8 pivot. T8 lock insert. T8 body screw. T8 all around, and there's really only 2 screws that you ever have to indirect with. That's wonderful. Yes, do that more, everybody. T8's super minimal hardware. Super easy to work with and take apart. You probably won't really even have to do that, let's be honest. But I know I will say that there's 1 or 2 Sharp Bow designs in my collection that I have taken apart. One of them came a little bit gunked up with some maybe older oil in it. And I cleaned it out, and my word, it is even better action. It got better. It centered perfectly back up. It had no problems. It's Speaking of centering, yeah, there's that little line there. And as you can see, these things are centered on it perfectly. There is no play in any direction on either of these knives. The opening mechanisms are, as you can see, the front flipper right here. And yes, you can, even though it is tight, you can 100% get to that hole for reverse flick. Now, it doesn't really work for thumb flick in any way, but so you have two means of operation. It's not super fidgety, but this isn't really a fidget knife. This is a gentlemanly carry knife. The clip is the only weakness that Sharp by Design knives, in my opinion, have. They tend to have a bit heavier on retention, though this one's actually a little bit better. It has been in and out of the pocket more, so this one might actually just be improved just by being in and out of the pocket a few more times. Hey, now don't go bumping into each other. As you can see, I take pretty good care of these knives. I love them. But I will say that the clip is the kind of only weakness. This is a pretty close to deep carry clip, which is great. The retention's a little bit heavy, but I just kind of wish that it was chamfered. These are not, they're kind of hard edges. And on at least one of his models, it kind of makes it a bit uncomfortable. For the most part, they're not uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form. And they almost disappear despite that on a lot of the models. But you can oftentimes feel them a little bit. They're not sharp, but they're hard edges, and I wouldn't mind seeing this. Come on, focus. There. I wouldn't mind seeing this forward area be trimmed down a little bit to be thinner. Like, take off that little bit of that so it has more of a rise and it's a little thinner. That can be improved slightly. The clip is, however, in no way, shape, or form bad, and it works. Despite not having a lot of rise, despite being hard at edges, it's still pretty darn great. And he uses this kind of style clip on almost all of his knives, so it's kind of a universal thing. Speaking of universal things, you hear that? Yeah. That is the detent knob. Let's see if you can see it. See right in there? Instead of a detent ball, they use a detent nub, which he uses and created. Brian Nadeau created this style of detent and uses it on all of his knives. It makes for an extremely satisfying, extremely clicky detent. It has a little bit less of a pop in, but there's no detent lash in any way, shape, or form. I mean, these things are pretty darn perfect in every way. And that detent nub system that he uses is pretty great. It makes for a very interesting feel to the deployment compared to almost any other knife. In my opinion, having that more contact space would probably also increase the likelihood of not developing any sort of lash in the detent or anything like that. I think it's a great design. I like it, and if nothing else, I would suggest, just if you get the chance, to check out one of these knives just for the experience of seeing how it feels different, because it does feel different than almost any other knife. The plunge grind on these knives is, as you can see, it ends right here. Yes, I would have liked to see them give us more life. I would like to see it way back here. I'm not super upset. I'm not going to be taking this knife out and using it too extensively. It does make it in my pocket reasonably frequently, but I'm not also beating this knife to death, so I'm not going to have to sharpen this knife that much. I still would like to see a little more life, but the stop pin on this knife is way up here. So as you can see, it hits underneath the lock face. So there's no way, shape, or form that you can are going to run into an issue if you should cut in your own choil. You also can't touch the blade, even though it's right there. Ergos. We talked about the stop pin. I mean, not the stop pin, the pocket clip. Despite that, with the contouring and the pocket clip on this knife model, the ergos are fantastic. It's neutral enough, but it's just great. You could choke up a little bit. I wouldn't go all the way up here. It's not a choil, but you could choke up a little bit. It still feels comfortable. It still feels reasonably safe. The knife is thin, very adept, very well balanced, good blade to handle ratio. With something else you'll find in Sharp by Design. The weight is balanced right here, which is pretty much where you want to hold it in your primary grip. Yeah. It's a great design, and it is a great execution. And the ergos reflect that. I also particularly like how he does his lock bar insert, because that's what you interact with when you disengage, more than you do with the actual frame of the knife. As you can see, it overlaps a bit. It allows for the lock bar insert to sit at a slightly different angle than the rest of the frame, which kind of allows him to dial in your lock bar access without having to maybe cut away too much. It's a good little touch, just like these 6-gun pivot, which is on, I think, all of his knives, as far as I know. But what do I know? Who knows? Another lovely thing that you'll notice is that there is no standoffs or backspacer or anything like that. It is a sort of clamshell construction where the two pieces of the frame come together to meet each other. He does this on, again, almost all of his knives that I know of. And he does it in different ways on a lot of the knives. Some of them connect up here, some of them connect different, more or less. Or it's interesting. It's always fun to see how he's tweaked the standard elements of his knives just a bit with his design, with each design. So, as I've been pretty much gushing over these things, I love them. I do. I love his designs. I love Brian Nadeau, Sharp by Design, knives in general. I have like 10 of them. These are premium knives. They're not budget by any way, shape, or form. They're expensive. They're Reate made, which is China, but he is an American designer. They're wonderful knives. They perform all well. They all come in amazingly high quality. Yes, I can feel the transitions just the tiniest bit, but barely. Like, if you had more callus on your hand, you probably weren't even going to feel that. You just barely feel the transitions on this thing. And it's pretty universal all around the entire knife. You can feel it, but you feel it about the exact same amount, barely. So the finishing is great. The execution, the design, it's a knockout of the park. It's a premium knife. It is not a budget knife. It is not even a mid-tier knife. This is an expensive upper-tier knife. Lower end of the upper tier, but high-tier production knife. Of course, the high end of the high tier is you getting into customs, and they're much, much more expensive. But this is still a big one. These come in something around $300 and I want to say $70. The original came in, I think, just a tiny bit cheaper than that. This one came in that general range. I believe that the current version of this knife with a black frame on the Cavizo website is probably still in the... No, it's in the $425 range. I literally just looked it up. That said, So yeah, it's an expensive premium knife. And that would make it pretty much unjustifiable for a lot of people. But if you're going to get a really, really good premium knife, these are probably some of the best executed ones you can find. They're super consistent and they're super high quality. I mean, I justify knives that are in that tier myself when I buy knives, and I have quite a few of them. But I will say that these ones feel like they earn it more. Right out of the box. So, is it recommendable? Yes. If you're looking for one of those high-tier knives, these are really good ones. Is it going to be for everyone? No knife is for everyone, but especially not a knife at this price point. So, yeah, I'm thinking these were probably both coming in right around the $400 price point, and the current ones with the inflation and stuff are at the $425. This one might have been a little under $400 when it first came out a few years ago. They're super great. They're recommendable. But you have to know what you're getting into. You have to be into knives. You have to be into the hobby. You have to have a reason to want to carry a knife like this. If you can justify it to yourself, because that's all that really matters, and you like it, then I would say pull the trigger on this faster than a lot of other knives in that ultra premium production territory, because you're probably going to get the best fit and finish and experience with these over almost anything else. Now, they are a little bit plainer in overall design. I like that, but you can get some crazy things going on at that price point too. That's really just up to you. But these are wonderful. And they are perfectly happy in my collection. As I said, I may even consider getting a third one if I can get one with the Bowie blade and the flipper tab. Yeah, there's not much else to say about these things because they're just great. If you can, check one out. If you ever get a knife at this tier, this is kind of a reasonable buy. Especially considering you're probably, other than the ones that are currently available, you're probably getting them off the secondary market. If you can get them in really good condition and save $50 or so on them, maybe more. Yeah, these are pretty good. They're pretty great. I'm really hoping to get more Sharp Eye designs in my collection in the future, and I have quite a few. Yeah. I like them. I recommend them. But you have to be looking for this kind of thing. To be fair, that's with everything though, isn't it? That's all I have to say about these. So I'm going to end our review here. Like and subscribe if you would. Drop some comments. What are your thoughts on these knives? What are your thoughts on these tiers of knives? How crazy do you think you have to be into these tiers of knives? A lot of people are, though. These are popular. And for good reason. Yeah. These are good ones. Thanks for sticking it out if you have. Thanks for watching at all, even if you're not still here. You don't know I'm thanking you, but I am. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.